So Mandisa, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But
thank you so much for the opportunity, Dr. Nick.
before we go into the future, can you tell us a little bit about your own background? Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Pietermaritzburg in KZN, and that is where my family is based out of, and that's where I spent all of my childhood, really. And it's still one of my favorite parts of the country. Very much a coastal girl, and really just enjoy that part of the world. I went to school there, both primary school and high school, and my family actually still based out there, so I travel out to KZN quite a lot.
And tell us, what was your dream career when you grew up?
I spent, I think, as most kids do, under the influence of their parents, most of my childhood years aspiring to be a doctor of sorts. And I think when I started entering into the high school phase where you start cutting up different animal parts, I soon realized that the medical profession was definitely not for me. And at that point, I started looking to different avenues. And I soon fell in love with the idea of being able to travel the world for a living. And so I really aspired to be a diplomat for the better part of my later high school years and most of my university career.
And I believe you did travel the world. You attended the famous George Washington University.
I did. So, it's funny what they say about what you desire and how you are able to sort of attract those things. I studied international relations at university, and almost as soon as I started studying international relations, opportunities opened up for me to work and study in international spaces. And so I acquired a Fulbright scholarship just after I completed my honors, and I spent 2.5 years living in DC, where I did attend George Washington University, but also got to have a small stint at the British Embassy under UK Trade and Investment, and also worked for a project finance consultancy based out on K Street called Delphos International. And that's really where I got my first big taste of working abroad, of living abroad, and getting to interact with people from different cultures from all over the world in the most amazing experience I think I had those many years ago.
So Mandisa, before we go back into your career, can you tell us who inspired you in your early days?
My mom has always been a huge source of inspiration for me. We grew up in a matriarchal family where women played leading roles in almost every aspect of our lives. And they really created an environment for us to believe that all things were possible. I never suggested anything about my future that my mom shot down. If anything, she was an incredible enabler. And from as young as I can remember, just really backed and believed in all of the dreams that I had for myself. And she is the earliest memory that I have of inspiration, and she's been a constant source in that regard.
Now, Mandisa, you have a very impressive profile. Not only your education, but obviously also your career. You rose through the ranks at Old Mutual. Today, you're the head of stakeholder relations. And if I counted correctly on LinkedIn, you accumulated 9 awards and honors, and you speak 5 languages. So looking back over your career, can you maybe share a couple of highlights?
Sure. So, when you study an arts degree, as I did, there was a joke in university. And people used to say, what is the difference between a pizza and a BA degree? And the catchphrase or the answer was always that a pizza could feed 4 people. And this really stressed me out for the longest time. Until I actually got an opportunity to get into the workspace and realize that it's less about what you've studied and it's more about how you apply yourself. It's more about how you show up, and it's more about how you take on the opportunities that come to you. So I think if I look back, on my career and what I consider to be the highlights are really those moments where I was able to put up my hand and take on a fundamentally different challenge. When I took on the role in project finance, I'd never worked in project finance before, but I was determined to make sure that my contribution was meaningful, and I absolutely loved it, and that turned out to be my transition into financial services. When I came home from the States, also kind of rolled the dice and applied for a role at Old Mutual, which I was fortunate to get, and got to work in retail for the first time, which was also a big highlight for me. And it opened doors in many ways, because it then led to, I guess, my third highlight, which was being able to take up a secondment opportunity as marketing manager in our PLC office in London. In 2016. And so those moments for me have always really stood out as highlights, not only because of the fact that the opportunities came my way, but rather because they each in their own right almost became shifts for me, in the sense that it was being able to take on a challenge I'd never taken on before, and really find my feet in a space and apply myself in a space where I'd be able to really add value. I guess finally transitioning into this role as head of stakeholder relations would be another highlight of my career at Old Mutual in particular, because not only has it given me the opportunity to really travel to various markets across the continent, which I absolutely love to do, but it's also opened up a fundamentally different world in terms of my engagement with stakeholders, both locally and across the continent. And those are, I think, my leading highlights from a career point of view.
Now, if I remember correctly, you also shared a moment from one of the investment summits with President Ramaphosa on LinkedIn. Did you play a role in the investment summit, or how did that come about?
There's a funny story behind that that picture, Dr. Nick, and I'll spare you the long version and just give you the high level summary. That picture was taken on the eve that Old Mutual listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. So we closed up or wound down our PLC operations in 2018 in our big homecoming, which we celebrated that evening, and President Ramaphosa was our guest of honor. We, during that period, as stakeholder relations, were responsible for driving engagements with our key stakeholders across the continent in terms of just being able to solidify the fact that Old Mutual was coming home to Africa. We were founded in Cape Town 176 years ago now. And so this homecoming for us was quite a milestone in our journey. And that evening, I got an opportunity to brief the president and also to share all of the stakeholder preparation that had obviously gone into the engagement that we had that night. In addition to that, we also had a series of engagements in multiple markets where we operate, including, the deputy governor of the Reserve Bank of Malawi. And the night after that photo was taken, we had our listing dinner in Zimbabwe, where we were joined by President Mnangagwa. So that was a really exciting time for us as an organization. And I look back fondly to what was a lot of hard work, but really, really paid off well in terms of the outcome and the delivery.
And tell us, looking back over your career, Mandisa, would you say there was a major turning point, or maybe number of turning points where things could have gone different?
Absolutely. I celebrate the power of reinvention as one of the most magical pieces of my career, or at least the career advice that I've received over the years. And that's the ability to pivot into spaces you've not been before, to pivot into roles you've not been before. And I think that's added tremendous color to what I would consider to be those turning points in my career. And so initially, I mean, I started out working in the public sector, coming out of the public sector, then transitioned into the private sector. And I've really enjoyed the work that I've done in the private sector, but also have kind of worked everywhere from the front line of retail all the way to sort of the very behind the scenes, and then subsequently more front lines of corporate affairs. So those turning points for me are indicative of the fact that anyone and everyone can pivot in their career. And sometimes the opportunities that we're looking for, that we fear from a change point of view, are actually the invitations to pivot into perhaps a more successful and even more productive season in our career development.
And Mandisa, what would you say is driving you today?
I am very passionate about partnerships. I think that as a world, the levels of inequality that we experience, or the levels of inequality that are all around us, are such that we're not going to be able to close these gaps without being deliberate about working together. And so in my current role in stakeholder relations, I get to live that out from an organizational point of view, from a day-to-day basis. But I also see it very much at play in other aspects of my life and in the work that I try and do. I am one of the founding directors of the Institute for Stakeholder Relations of Southern Africa. And the real mandate for the Institute is to bring together different stakeholders to identify opportunities to collaborate and to partner. And I think that by so doing, we are able to create a much bigger impact in our society than we are on our own. And this, from an organizational point of view, rings true, but also as individuals. We are not going to be able to reach all of the people across the world as individuals, but we certainly can reach a lot more people by partnering and by finding people with common goals and common vision. The Sustainable Development Goals actually highlight the 17th goal is partnerships for the goals. And so for me, partnership is a huge motivator. And it's not just partnerships independently, but it's rather how we use partnerships to combat what I believe today are some of the world's most glaring challenges.
Now, Mandisa, looking into the future, and I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
I think the future of leadership for me really means the ability to make a difference in the world and to be deliberate about making that difference. We have a lot of platforms that we are able to use to connect with one another. We've got a lot of access to information that we never had before. We've got access to means and resources. But I find often that we're not always deliberate about making sure that that access translates into making a difference. And making a difference for me means specifically being able to grant access to others, to the privileges and the opportunities that we have, particularly those of us who have been fortunate enough to enter into the middle class and the upper middle class. And in a country like South Africa in particular, I think we're not ever going to be able to truly rest in the successes that we achieve if we're not able to address the glaring challenge posed by inequality and all of those that remain financially and economically excluded in our economy.
Now, Mandisa, when it comes to building future leaders, what have you learned from your own journey, your own leadership journey, that you consider important for empowering future leaders?
I would say that I never intended to be a leader, Dr. Nick. It was something that almost happened to me, I would say, largely as a result of the fact that I was very committed to being impactful in the spaces and in the areas that I found myself in. I think almost as early as my school going age, I was always very passionate about justice, or a sense of justice and fairness, and being able to stand up for the views of others, particularly those that were less comfortable to use their voices. And that's something that's rung true for me throughout my career, and also just throughout my formative years. And I think it is what I identify as the starting point of leadership. So it's not necessarily about having fancy titles and big roles and large amounts of money and huge projects. I think leadership is the ability to have empathy, uh, the ability to translate that empathy into a direct commitment to doing something that will not only benefit yourself, but will benefit others. And I think once you tap into that empathy, once you employ that empathy, you'll find yourself invariably sitting in a position of some kind of leadership, whether that's leadership in your home, whether that's leadership in your community, whether that's leadership in your religious fraternity, but a heart for and an empathy towards others and making a difference in the lives of other people, I think is the genesis for leadership. That's been true for my journey. And I think for building any kind of leaders, your motivation in leadership will always sustain you or sustain you down that path.
And Mandisa, when you speak to aspiring leaders, what is it that you tell them about social media? How should they navigate social media to build their own leadership brand?
So I wouldn't consider myself as a big advisor on social media, but on the occasion where I have had the opportunity to talk to my mentees, for instance, about social media, I always again try and get them to think about what's important to them and what they feel that their personal brand, for instance, represents, and how they can try and align those two things. The danger of social media today, and all media really, is that things that we put out on public channels, we can very seldom take back. And I think the alignment of one's personal values and what one seeks to achieve should very much align with what they put out there. It's an incredibly powerful platform to share messages. And I think sometimes we just need to be a little bit more deliberate about how we filter those messages and how we use social media to amplify what we believe in and what we want to share and communicate into the world. So that would be my advice. And those are the thoughts that I've shared with those who have had the privilege of having the social media conversation with. It's not just about personal branding, but it's about making sure that your social media presence is congruent with your personal brand, and that you are constantly trying to ensure that there is alignment of those two things.
Now, Mandisa, when it comes to challenges, what is your advice to future leaders? In what are some of the biggest challenges future leaders should expect to encounter in their career?
In the world that we live in today, I think one of the biggest challenges that we are constantly finding ourselves addressing subliminally and sometimes quite overtly are how we maintain a sense of integrity. And I think knowing oneself, knowing again one's values and what one stands for, even as organizations, knowing your organization's values and living by those organizational values, showing up by those values, and ensuring that those values are consistent as we channel them is one of the biggest challenges that we face, simply because it's so easy to present as one thing and to behave as another. And I think we are constantly experiencing dissonance in leadership across the world, where we expect one thing of leaders and they show up in a different way, or we have been promised a certain thing by leaders and the delivery of it is vastly different from what's been promised. So that sense of integrity and showing up as you are and actually being able to deliver what you've said that you are, I think that is one of the biggest leadership challenges that future leaders are likely to encounter. And it very much ties back to also the social media question that you'd asked me before. Is there integrity in our social media? Is there integrity in the way that we speak? Is there integrity in the products and services that we offer to our customers? Are we true about what we put out, and can we stand behind it when it gets questioned? I think that will be one of the growing conundrums of our time, and more than anything for leaders to really lead and inspire in this time, an ability to act with integrity is going to be very important.
Now, Mandisa, if you were to design a curriculum for future leaders, what are some of the new skills you would want to factor in?
Oh my goodness. So buzzword digital, digital, digital. I think digital skills are a game changer in every respect. The ability that they have to democratize access to things that were far and remote to many of us, I think is just further solidifying the fact that they are not only great tools for enhancing access, but they're also great tools for us to use as organizations and individuals to connect more, to engage more, and also to find and experience greater efficiencies. If I think of the number of people that are running digital businesses, if I think of how many products are now transferred, sold, and created online, if we think of, what one may call the cryptocurrency revolution, all of that speaks to a move into an age that's very different to the one that we've been in. And this isn't necessarily for engineers or for scientists or for computer engineers or computer scientists. There really is access to all of us. And as we are constantly as organizations grappling with the concept of agile and introducing sprints into our own organizations, I think there's a lot to be said about how we can infuse that way of thinking, design thinking into school curriculums, into university curriculums, and transfer not only the thinking and the principles, but also transfer very deliberately the skills into those spaces, because I think those are definitely the game changer skills going forward.
Now, Mandisa, as a mentor to future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
So mentorship is very close to my heart, Dr. Nick, and I'll share with you, I'll share with you two of the stories that immediately come to mind. I mentor out at a school in Henley on Klip, which is just outside of Johannesburg, at an all-girls high school. And from time to time, I'll have, we'll do group coaching and we'll also do individual coaching. And I can't tell you the number of times where I've, sat down or had a one-on-one with a mentee, and they've just kind of said, I don't think that I can do it. I don't think I'm smart enough. I don't think that I have the competence to do this. I don't think that I'm supposed to be here. I don't think that I am the best person or suited for this. And I'm also really worried about what other people think. And my response to that is always to kind of use very practical examples of, well, if not you, then who? You're not here by mistake. You've been put here for a very specific purpose, and you've got the opportunity to do it. And if you don't take up the opportunity, then you'll always wonder. And so the ability to transfer a sense of confidence and self-belief into my mentees has been really one of my favorite things. And more than more than two of them have come back to say, you know, when we had that conversation, it fundamentally changed the way that I saw myself in that situation. I've had girls come to say, you know, after we spoke, I decided to put up my hand and I actually ran for the RCL, or I'm now, you know, serving as the chairperson of this particular student group, or you were absolutely right, I can do it. I got 89% on my IT assignment. And it's those kind of narratives for me, which have been truly inspiring in terms of working with my mentees. One of my older mentees I started working with a couple of years ago in a professional capacity, joined our organization as an intern and subsequently went on to do wild and amazing things. And she and I recently connected, and she was saying to me that she's so grateful for the opportunities and she's so grateful for the access that that the support that she's gotten along the way in her career, and she appreciates the fact that she gets to be part of something you know, that we're working on and that we're delivering together. And I said to her, there's nothing about it that's a coincidence. She is an incredible young lady. She's very skilled and very talented, and all she's really needed is the opportunity to work with people who see something special in her. And so to reflect that back to her, her own exceptional sense and her own sense of accomplishments and achievement is something that more recently I really took away smiling from.
And Mandisa, looking back over your own leadership journey and maybe your learning journey, are there any role models of leadership that you would recommend future leaders should study and learn from?
So leadership, I think, is difficult to study. It was difficult to study, but easy to experience. Not impossible to study, but I think is easier experienced than studied. And so from my own life, I think some of the best lessons of leadership have been those that have been most tangible to me. I think every leader that you have the opportunity to encounter will teach you something, whether it's what you admire about that leader or what you wish was different about that leader. I think it's an opportunity to then, you know, reflect to yourself what it is that you like and admire about a certain leader, or what it is that makes you uncomfortable about another one, and really use those opportunities to inform your own sense of leadership. So I learn vicariously and practically from all of those who I have the opportunity of interacting with from a leadership point of view. My direct line managers over the years have probably been some of the greatest contributors to my leadership journey. I've watched how they have modeled leadership. I've learned from their strengths, but I've also learned incredibly from their weaknesses. And all of those things have, in a way, impacted my own leadership journey and really given me the opportunity to take a step back and ask myself difficult questions at times, but also taken a step back to really reward myself for some of the leadership moments that I have been proudest of. A lot of them obviously coming from what I would have learned from them. I think another place where the power of leadership should never be taken for granted is the home. I think in a home environment, there's an enormous opportunity to not only model leadership, but there's also a great opportunity for people to learn how to be leaders in their own right, in a space where they feel comfortable and where they belong. And where there's a sense of affirmation and there's a sense of support, it's often clear that difference that makes in the way that people show up and in terms of the investment that's made in them as they navigate the rest of their lives. And I say that having really for the first time experienced leadership right in my home, and seen strong leaders in a home environment, but also having been empowered to lead from a very young age in my own small way. But I think it's all of those incremental opportunities that one has to be a leader that kind of start to let you know that there's something about this that I might possibly be good at, or there's something that I think I can further do to enhance this, or just gives you an indication of the fact that this is something that I need to continue to refine and develop for myself. So those for me have been, I think, two of the greatest sources of leadership. I naturally enjoy reading quite a bit, reading and writing, and so my favorite authors from a leadership point of view would definitely be the likes of Jim Collins and Gary Chapman, and a couple of others. So those are great reading sources, but I think from a practical point of view, really being able to model from those around me and learning from those around me.
Now, Mandisa, how can our listeners reach out to you, and where should they follow you?
So I'm very active on LinkedIn. If you send me a message or send me an invite, I'm usually quite good about coming back. That's actually how I got into contact with Dr. Nick, and that's the primary space in which you would be able to get hold of me. From a work point of view, because I deal with people and stakeholders constantly. You drop me an email on my old initial email address, I am usually very responsive to that as well. And it's also another one of the ways that people are welcome to reach out to me and to partner with our organization. We're always looking to hear from our stakeholders as well as work together with our stakeholders to deliver for our customers. And so those are the two primary ways in which you would be able to get hold of me.
Now, last but not least, Mandisa, is there one piece of advice that you would really like to convey to future leaders that they should implement in their own life?
One piece of advice that I would share with future leaders to implement in their own life. Dr. Nick, I'm going to be very simple about it, but also very direct about it, is be the kind of leader that you would want to have lead you. I think for me, that is the beginning of the journey, and that's the bar, because it's only when you start being a leader that you fully appreciate the challenges, the nuances, and the weight that leadership carries. Leadership is an incredible privilege, and I think many people aspire to it. But I'm less confident of the number of people that fully appreciate the cost of it and some of the sacrifices that leaders make along the way. And I think the best way to experience the fullness of leadership is to start by being a leader yourself. So if you have an aspiration to be led better, or if you have an aspiration to lead, get a constituency, roll up your sleeves and start doing the work. And I think as you commence your journey, you'll soon find that opportunities and doors open up that will allow you to take that work further.
Well, Mandisa, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership and reminding us that leadership starts at home. And so many times it's about helping others to show up better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nick. Really appreciate your time.